Saturday, 9:37 a.m., Columbia State University Stadium. The May sky over Southern America was oddly clear, not a cloud in sight, flags waved gently in the breeze. In the bleachers of Columbia State Stadium, thousands of parents, students, and friends gathered to witness something sacred: graduation day. Colonel Nadine Ellis sat still in the front row near the field, an area marked Guest of Honor, valedictorian family. She wore a navy blue dress, modest and pressed, a wide-brimmed hat to block the sun, and tucked beneath her light shawl was a small velvet box. Inside, a bronze retirement pin etched with U.S. Army, retired. She had arrived early, very early. She always did. The military had taught her that being on time meant you were already late. Being early meant you were prepared. Behind her, a man in business casual leaned forward. "Excuse me, ma'am, are you sure you're in the right section?" Nadine turned politely. "Yes. My daughter is Jada Ellis. She's today's valedictorian." He paused, then offered a half smile. Maybe it was because she was alone, or because of her skin, or maybe something quieter, the quiet dignity that made people second-guess authority when it didn't come with noise. 9:42 a.m. A state trooper, Officer Keith Danner, began patrolling the aisle between seating rows. He paused when the same man pointed discreetly. Danner approached from Nadine's left. "Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your pass." Nadine calmly reached into her purse, pulled out a laminated yellow card stamped "Honored Family Guest, Stage Left Access." But Danner didn't inspect it carefully, his brows furrowed. "Where'd you get this?" "From the Chancellor's office. My daughter—" "I need you to step aside, ma'am." "Excuse me?" "Now, you're not on the pre-approved list I was given." She folded the pass neatly and returned it to her purse, her voice steady. "That's because the Chancellor himself invited me. You may confirm with him." "Or," Danner said coolly, "you can move now, or I'll remove you." 9:45 a.m. The tone changed. People began to turn their heads. A young woman nearby said quietly, "She's the valedictorian's mom. I saw her name in the program." But Danner didn't stop. His hand rested now on his belt. "Ma'am, this is your last warning." "You are escalating something unnecessarily," Nadine said, voice even, but her pulse quickening. "I am not resisting, but you are mistaken." And then, the sharp click of handcuffs split the silence. Gasps echoed. A few phones lifted. A flash went off. On the stage, a voice on the mic boomed. "Our valedictorian, summa cum laude in political science, and a published author at 22, please welcome Jada Ellis." Jada walked onto the stage, the applause rising until her gaze shifted to the left bleachers, where her mother stood frozen in place, one arm twisted behind her back. She stopped mid-step. Her body went rigid, and then her voice rang out, not from a place of performance, but from somewhere raw, deep. "That woman, being detained right now in front of all of you, is my mother, retired U.S. Army Colonel Nadine Ellis." A wave passed through the stadium. People stood. Danner paused mid-motion. The air thickened. 27 years of service, 2 deployments, 1 Bronze Star. She didn't ask to sit there. She was invited. Jada's voice broke, but she stood tall. "And now I'm asking all of you, is this what service gets you in this country?" 9:49 a.m. The live stream reached 87,000 views in 6 minutes. Hashtags erupted. Hashtag letter sit number Colonel Ellis she served. To Danner released her, but the damage was done. A moment that was supposed to belong to Jada now belonged to everyone watching. 10 a.m. The ceremony was paused. Security bristled. Reporters swarmed the campus gates. Nadine Ellis's name trended nationally within 30 minutes, but she remained seated, calm, focused. Her wrist bore the red imprint of cuffs, but she never touched the velvet box still in her lap. 11:12 a.m. The ceremony tent, Columbia State campus. The private tent had been set up for post-ceremony faculty photos, but now it was filled with silence, uneaten pastries, and 2 folding chairs. Nadine sat in one of them, still, centered. Except her fingers trembled slightly as she turned the velvet box over and over in her hands. She hadn't opened it. She wasn't sure if she could. The bronze pin inside used to represent closure, but today it felt like unfinished business. Jada entered, gown still on, honor cords draped over her shoulders. Her voice was quiet. "Mom, I'm so sorry." Nadine looked up. Her eyes were clear. "You didn't do anything wrong." Jada sat across from her. "But they made you feel wrong." Nadine didn't respond. Not yet. 11:45 a.m. Outside the tent. The university's PR team was scrambling. Reporters lined up along the perimeter, being held back by campus police. But the story had already broken through containment. Clips from 3 different angles were circulating online. One captured the exact moment Danner snapped the cuffs onto Nadine's wrists. Another caught Jada's speech. The audio on that video was crisp, unshakable. She didn't ask to sit there. She was invited. One caption read, "When a bronze star isn't enough to earn a chair in America, 1 p.m. Arlington, Virginia. At a modest row house on the edge of Fort Myer, Helen Koenig, a 67-year-old Gold Star mother, watched the footage for the second time. Her tea had gone cold. She recognized the face. She had served with Nadine in Iraq, had cried with her at a burial detail outside Tikrit, had watched her give CPR to a dying boy who wasn't even supposed to be near the base. Helen didn't tweet. She wrote letters. She pulled out a pen. "Colonel Ellis, I saw what they did to you. I saw them dishonor the uniform without even knowing it. I remember when you held my hand after my son died in 2006. You told me grief had no rank, no uniform. Now I tell you, dignity does not need approval. You showed it when others failed." She sealed the envelope and labeled it. To Colonel Nadine Ellis, Return CO, Columbia State, Office of the Chancellor, 2:16 p.m., on campus. In the Chancellor's office, phones were still ringing. They were trying to draft a statement, but every word sounded like too little. Because it was. 3:30 p.m., press conference attempt. A local reporter cornered Lieutenant Governor Ryan Malloy, who was on site for the ceremony. "Sir, are you aware a decorated Army colonel was just handcuffed by one of your state troopers during a graduation?" Malloy stammered. I wasn't fully briefed on that." "Well, the internet has been briefed. Over 4.6 million views now. Any comment? We're looking into it. And of course, we support our veterans." That's when a veteran in the crowd called out, "Supporting us isn't about flag pins and bumper stickers. It's about not humiliating our mothers in public." Silence. Microphones tilted forward. 5 p.m. Nadine's apartment off Georgia Avenue, D.C. Back home, Nadine sat by her living room window, watching the afternoon light stretch across the floor. She still hadn't taken off her shoes. On her coffee table, 2 news anchors debated whether her treatment was a racial incident or a misunderstanding. She turned the volume down. What they didn't know, what none of them had seen, was the moment before the handcuffs, when her hand hovered over her ID badge. The hesitation, the calculation. Would reaching make her a target? Would not reaching make her invisible? That pause haunted her. 7:12 p.m. National broadcast begins. CNN ran the clip as its lead story. The host didn't editorialize. She just played the moment Jada said, Is this what service gets you in this country? Then she let the silence speak. 8:01 p.m. State Police Internal Affairs Division. The file was already opened. Officer Danner's record. 2 complaints for escalated encounters. 1 reprimand. Mandatory diversity training, marked incomplete. A junior officer, just starting her shift, stared at the screen. She looked down at her own badge. Then she closed the file and opened a new one. Use of force complaint, graduation day, Columbia State. Filed by anonymous officer. Subject, Trooper, Keith Danner, 10:23 p.m., in bed. Finally. Nadine didn't sleep. She rarely did after public events. But this time, it wasn't the crowd that kept her awake. It was the thought that she had nearly been erased, right there, in the middle of her daughter's triumph. And if she could be erased, what did that mean for the mothers with no rank, no medals, no cameras? She reached for her phone, typed something, deleted it, then typed again. Sometimes the seat you're denied says more than the invitation ever could. She hit post, then turned off the light. 6 weeks later, U.S. District Court, Richmond, Virginia. The courthouse wasn't grand. It was one of those federal buildings made of pale stone and outdated carpet. But that morning, it felt like the center of a reckoning. The press had shown up before dawn. Veterans in uniform lined the sidewalk, not chanting, just standing, silent, holding signs like, "She served, he cuffed." Dignity is not up for debate. This is not just about her. Inside courtroom 4B, every seat was taken. The defendant, Trooper Keith Danner, sat stiffly between his attorney and a state representative. He wore a gray suit, no tie. The weight of every lens in the room bore down on him, but still, he looked indifferent, maybe even defiant. Across from him sat Colonel Nadine Ellis, in civilian clothes, a simple blouse, slacks, nothing showy, no ribbons, no medals, just gravity. At her side was her daughter, Jada. She held her mother's hand until the bailiff called the session into order. 9:08 a.m., opening statements. The prosecutor, Elijah Merrick, stood tall. His voice didn't thunder. It cut. We are not here today because someone made a paperwork error. We are here because a public servant used power to humiliate a citizen on the very soil she fought to protect. He gestured toward Nadine without theatrics. A decorated veteran, a mother, wrongfully restrained at her daughter's graduation. Why? Because someone assumed she didn't belong. Then he turned to the jury. This is not about race alone. It's about perception, about instinct, about systems. The badge is not a shield for ignorance. It is a responsibility. Danner's defense attorney, Marcus Elroy, leaned into a familiar playbook. My client acted according to protocol. He perceived an irregularity. He followed the chain of procedure. There was no malice, no injury. This has been blown out of proportion by media and optics. He glanced at Nadine as if she were a photo, not a person. 10:12 a.m. The footage plays 2 angles, one from the student live stream, the other from a campus security cam. It played without narration. The pause, the question, the badge, the refusal, the cuffs. And Jada's voice cutting through the moment like lightning. That woman is my mother. Retired U.S. Army Colonel Nadine Ellis. The courtroom did not react loudly, but the silence that followed was heavy, like the entire room had stopped breathing. 10:36 a.m. First witness, Lieutenant Miriam Cho, campus security supervisor. She was the one who approved Nadine's guest pass. Her name was on the invitation list directly from the chancellor's office. She followed every instruction. Elroy tried to press. So why wasn't her name on the officer's pre-checked list? Because the list was outdated. The updated version was emailed 42 minutes before the ceremony. Could Trooper Danner have seen it? Yes, if he'd checked his inbox. 11:22 a.m. Second. Witness, Jada Ellis. She took the stand in her tan blazer and student sash still visible from her graduation photo. Her voice didn't shake. She had learned that from her mother. She never raises her voice, not even in war. She didn't panic. She didn't resist. But he still saw her as a problem to be removed. "What do you think he saw?" the prosecutor asked. He didn't see her medals or her name tag. He saw black, alone, unapologetic, and assumed she didn't belong. 1:06 p.m., break for lunch. Outside, the crowd had grown. Veterans, mothers, students, and one group no one expected. First responders. A black female firefighter from Norfolk held up a cardboard sign. "If she doesn't belong, none of us do." Inside, Nadine sat quietly in the hallway with her hands folded. A woman approached. Gray curls, Medal of Honor lapel pin. "Colonel Ellis?" "Yes." "I'm Mary Elkins. My son died in Fallujah. He would have wanted me to be here, and so here I am." She didn't say anything else, just sat down beside Nadine. 2:03 p.m. Surprise. Witness, Officer Shannon Vega. A state trooper from a neighboring county. She had trained briefly with Danner years ago. "I filed a report in 2021 after he detained a Latino father for waiting outside his daughter's school. Same pattern. No aggression. Just assumptions." "What happened to the report?" "It disappeared. No action taken." The courtroom shifted. This was no longer about a single bad moment. It was about a pattern. 3:12 p.m., the testimony that changed the room. Colonel Nadine Ellis took the stand. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't quote the Constitution. She didn't tell war stories. She simply described a moment. "He asked me to move. I offered my pass. He didn't look. I said who I was. He didn't hear. And when I reached, just reached, for my ID, he reached for the cuffs." "Were you afraid?" Merrick asked. She looked at the jury. "Not for myself. I was afraid for my daughter, that she would have to remember her graduation as the day they caged her mother like a trespasser." "What do you want from this court?" Her voice remained even. Not revenge, just acknowledgement. That what happened was real, that it was wrong, and that it wasn't just about me. 4:10 p.m., cross-examination. Elroy tried to press. "Colonel Ellis, would you agree the officer was doing his job?" "No." "You mean, doing a job is not the same as doing what's right." He hesitated. "So, you believe his intent was malicious?" "I don't care what he intended. I care what happened. Intent doesn't change impact." That line stuck. Journalists typed it out instantly. 4:43 p.m. Closing argument. Merrick's voice was calm. "You don't have to be a general to deserve dignity. You don't have to be a mother to understand grief. But if we can't recognize either, then we're not just failing her. We're failing all of us." Verdict. To come. The judge recessed the court. Jury deliberations would begin the next morning, but the nation was already deliberating, and Colonel Nadine Ellis had already been heard. Next morning, 8:57 a.m., U.S. District Court, Richmond, Virginia. The jury had returned. Just under 4 hours of deliberation. The courtroom was silent, more than usual. Even the press row wasn't typing. Not one whisper, not one cough. Trooper Keith Danner sat with his shoulders stiff and jaw clenched. Colonel Nadine Ellis sat across from him, her hands folded neatly in her lap. Her daughter, Jada, rested a hand on her back, just between her shoulder blades. A quiet signal. I'm here, no matter what comes next. The foreperson rose. On the count of unlawful restraint under color of law, guilty. On the count of civil rights violation, guilty. On the count of abuse of authority, guilty. There was no gasp, no outburst, just breath held. and finally released. 9:11 a.m. Sentencing. Hearing the judge, a reserved black woman in her early 60s, leaned forward, her voice like a stone carving truth into the record. Trooper Danner, this court finds not only a failure of professional judgment, but a fundamental breach of the public trust. She paused. You had 9 prior complaints. You ignored direct documentation. You escalated without threat. You dismissed identity, dismissed humanity, and in doing so, you committed more than a procedural error. You committed a moral one. You are hereby sentenced to 12 years in federal custody. No parole. Gasps this time. But not because of the number, because it was real and rare. A conviction. A consequence. 9:34 a.m. Victim statement, Nadine Ellis. She stood. No notes, just her. I didn't ask for this trial. I asked for a chair to sit in, that's all, to see my daughter speak. Her voice didn't tremble, but it weighed. That chair was denied because someone didn't think I belonged, because of how I looked, because of what they didn't bother to see. I wore the uniform of this country for nearly 3 decades. I bled for it. I buried friends for it. I carried its flag into foreign sand and stood beneath it in storms. But that day, none of that mattered. All that mattered was that I didn't fit the picture in his head. She turned to Danner. You didn't just humiliate me. You rewrote my daughter's memory. You took the only moment she'll ever have like that and made it about your assumptions. Danner looked down. It was the first time anyone in the room had seen him show the weight of what he'd done. 10:22 a.m. outside the courthouse. The crowd had grown. News vans, veterans, mothers, teachers, students, and silence, again. Nadine stepped onto the steps. Microphones crowded her. Colonel Ellis, how do you feel? Do you believe justice was served? Will you be suing the department? She looked around, her daughter by her side, former soldiers behind her, strangers who now knew her name. She stepped to the mic. I didn't come here to punish a man. I came to remind a country that forgetting people like me has a cost. She looked out, not at the cameras, but past them, to the parents watching at home, to the soldiers watching from base, to the kids who saw that clip online and wondered if their mother could be next. My daughter had one day to stand at the center of the world and speak, and I should have just been in the audience, just a mom, not a headline. But since we're here, let me say this. You don't have to wear a uniform to deserve dignity. You don't need a medal to deserve a seat. You just need to be human. She stepped back. The reporters didn't shout follow-ups. They just let the words land. 3:17 p.m., State Police Headquarters. The official press release came. We deeply regret the events surrounding the graduation at Columbia State. A full review of protocols and diversity training programs is underway. Too late. The image had already spread worldwide. Colonel Nadine Ellis, standing firm while cuffed. Her daughter, frozen on stage. Her face, calm, dignified, seen. That evening, ABC National News anchor. In a time where division dominates headlines, one moment of restraint, one speech of quiet power has reminded us what accountability sounds like. They played Jada's speech again. She didn't ask to sit there, she was invited. And then Nadine's voice. You just need to be human. That night, at home, Nadine sat alone on the porch, one folding chair, one cup of tea, the velvet box still unopened. She finally flipped it open. Inside, her retirement pin, bronze, simple. She smiled faintly. Then she reached for a pen. She wrote on the inside of the lid, I wore this for 27 years, but I earned it most. That day they tried to take my seat. She closed the box, set it on the table, and exhaled. 1 month later, Columbia State University, Political Science, 201 summer session. Professor Grant had changed the syllabus. The lesson on civil liberties and state authority used to open with a case from 1978. Not anymore. Today, he played the clip that the entire country had seen. She didn't ask to sit there. She was invited. The students, mostly freshmen, some veterans on the GI Bill, watched in silence. One of them raised a hand. "Professor, did she ever say what she wanted to happen after the trial?" Grant nodded. He clicked the next slide. It was a quote from a local town hall Nadine had attended, unannounced a week earlier. "I didn't want more noise. I wanted the next officer to hesitate, to ask instead of assume." Same day. Prince George's County, Maryland, post office lobby. Jada stood in line holding a box. Inside, over 1,400 letters, some typed, some handwritten, some from schoolchildren who had never met a soldier but now wanted to write their own names like Colonel Ellis. One from a man in Des Moines read, "I'm not black, I'm not military, I'm not even a parent, but I saw you, and I thought, if that can happen to her, I need to do more than just watch. I need to speak." Later that week, Police Academy, Eastern Virginia. Nadine had agreed, reluctantly, to speak at a training session. She walked in with no slides, no speech, just a question. How many of you have ever paused before assuming? Silence. How many of you know what it's like to be questioned while grieving? One cadet raised his hand, slowly. How many of you think your badge protects you from bias? No one moved. Nadine smiled, tired, but real. It doesn't. That's why you train. That's why you think before you act, because the next person you handcuff might be someone who already defended your right to wear that badge. July 4th, a small memorial service at a park in D.C. They had invited her to speak at the Capitol. She declined. Instead, she sat in a folding chair beside a makeshift memorial wall in Anacostia, where 12 local veterans' names were etched in steel. She brought two things: a sunflower, Jada's favorite flower, and the velvet box, still unopened since that night on her porch. This time, she left both behind. No speeches, just presence. August 14th, University of Michigan Law School. A panel on civil liberties and public accountability invited 3 guests. 2 were lawyers. One was Nadine Ellis. She wasn't there as a veteran or as a victim. She was there as a voice. She spoke once. Accountability isn't revenge. It's memory with weight. Justice doesn't mean punishment. It means prevention. You don't fix the past. You shape what comes next. The dean wrote afterward, "She taught more in 12 minutes than our textbooks did in 12 chapters." September 3rd, Jada's first day at Harvard Law. She wore a navy blue blazer. In her breast pocket, a copy of her mother's invitation pass, laminated, pressed. She had it reprinted not because she needed it, but because it reminded her of what not being seen had cost. She placed it on her dorm desk. Then she picked up her pen and began writing her first legal essay, "Perception as Policy, the Invisible Handcuffs of Assumption." Final scene, one ordinary afternoon, train station, D.C. Nadine sat on a wooden bench at Union Station. No cameras, no interviews, just a woman in civilian clothes, reading quietly. A young man, maybe in his early 20s, walked up, hesitating. "Ma'am, excuse me, are you Colonel Ellis?" She looked up, surprised. "I was," he smiled. "My mom watched you on the news. She said that was the first time she ever saw herself respected in a courtroom." Nadine nodded, unsure how to reply. Then he said, "And I just wanted to say thank you for taking a seat so we all could stand." She smiled, a small one, but full. As he left, she turned back to her book, and for the first time in months, she let herself read in peace.